first, just give me your initial reaction to this new audio I just played of the former president being interviewed by Jonathan Karl and recounting the conversation he had with his vice president on the morning of January 6th.
Well, first of all, I mean, it's very clear that threats of violence and menace has become part of our political culture, but it's also obvious that there are elements of the Republican Party, dominant elements of the Republican Party, that are willing to accept that. I really did think that John Barrasso's refusal to comment on this is really kind of a marker of the way that Republicans continue to move the window of acceptable behavior. You know, how many times over the last 5 years have we had the conversation, what's the red line? At what point will Republicans push back against this? Well, now we're talking about a mob that was chanting, hang Mike Pence, that wanted to injure or kill the sitting vice president of Senator John Barrasso's own party, and he can't bring himself to criticize that or Donald Trump's rationalization of that. So, you know, for anyone who thinks that this is going to go away, that the adults in the room are going to stand up, that reason will prevail, that is not happening in today's Republican Party. And given some of the poll numbers, it's unlikely to happen anytime soon.
I got to say, John Allen, there was something that stood out to me in the piece that you wrote, comparing how Republicans now see public service as secondary to Trump service. And I think we saw that front and center just now in the sound that I played, when asked specifically to respond to the comments that we heard from the former president and avoiding it.
Yeah, absolutely, Yasmin. You hit the nail on the head there. Senator John Barrasso said the Republican Party is unified. What he didn't say, but what is clear and implicit in what he was getting after, is they are unified behind Donald Trump. And while he says he may not agree with Donald Trump on every issue, he's certainly not going to identify the issues on which he disagrees with him. And he chose not to identify the hanging of Mike Pence as something that he disagrees with, or any of that rhetoric or the discussion from President Trump with Mike Pence, where he said, are you going to be a patriot, or the other thing? And, you know, I think there are a lot of Americans who look at Mike Pence on that particular day and say he actually did choose to be a patriot by doing what his job required him to do in certifying the election, and in not bowing, and not bowing to President Trump or the people who are rioting to try to stop the election at the Capitol.
Wadid, I got to say, we talk about a lot of the subpoenas that have obviously been issued to the people surrounding Trump, from the big names to the smaller names, from Stephen Miller to Kayleigh McEnany to Steve Bannon. And I can't help but think, with all of this audio that is now subsequently leaked, especially with this interview with Jonathan Karl, are they weighing a subpoena to the former president?
Absolutely, Yasmin. This comes down to
Wendy.
them constantly negotiating whether or not they're going to take a charge for Trump, a criminal charge for Trump, versus face direct wrath from Trump in their personal lives or even their professional lives. And so that's what a lot of these folks are negotiating. But I assure you, as these subpoenas and these charges for criminal contempt now have teeth, with the DOJ backing them in the case of Bannon, that's going to look less and less attractive as an option as far as deferring to Trump on whether or not they participate and follow through with the legal requirements of being present and responding to a subpoena. I also want to go back to Senator Barrasso, because the other thing that he said was that President Trump brings a credible amount of energy to the party. And that is your marker. That is your marker that the GOP has no intention of letting him go, and they are fully ready to stay aligned behind him, because John's right. They don't care about governing. They don't care about the people. This all comes down to, just like with these other witnesses on the subpoena list for the Select Committee, what are you willing to do to demonstrate your loyalty to Trump out of fear for what he could do to you? And we know for members of Congress that fear lies in him mobilizing his base for them in the 2022 midterms, because that's the big bet they made. That's the bet that McCarthy made when he went and kissed Trump's ring just days after the January 6th attack on the Capitol building. And that's what's being reaffirmed in McCarthy's silence and this ridiculous response from Senator Barrasso, and more that we're going to see from the GOP as they continue to circle the wagons around Trump, only for in the name of the energy that he brings to their party that they absolutely do not want to let go.
Well, and Jonathan Allen, I mean, even this threat of stripping the Republicans that voted in favor of Biden's infrastructure bill in the House, stripping them of their committee assignments.
Yeah, Yasmin, a couple things that are interesting about that. Number one, that sort of bloodlust, the vengeance, the idea that you're going to punish somebody for voting for their constituents rather than following what President Trump wants. I mean, we saw Mitch McConnell in the Senate vote for that infrastructure bill, and now there are House members that are saying the 13 Republican House members who voted that way are such traitors they should lose the ability to represent their districts on committees. The other interesting thing about that is a lot of these rank and file members of Congress don't understand how the committee system works and how these people are appointed. You can't, if you're in the minority party, strip members off of their committees. That's something that is required to be done by a vote on the House floor, which means Nancy Pelosi controls whether those 13 members of Congress lose their committee assignments or not. And she's certainly, I'll try to use non-profane language, certainly is heck not going to strip them off their committees for voting for an infrastructure bill. So, you heard Matt Gaetz, the congressman from Florida, try another tack at it, which is to stop them from being the ranking members, the top Republicans on committees. That's something they could do, but I don't see what great value it has to the Republican Party to start saying, if you vote in favor of your constituents and vote in favor of things that they want, that you can't be a member of the Republican Party. I mean, it's just it's nonsensical. It will leave them with a lot fewer members.
Charlie Sykes, let's talk Bannon tomorrow as we watch what's going to take place over the next 24 hours. You wrote, Bannon knows what he's doing. He's got a plan. I actually want to read for folks what you wrote here. So Bannon told his podcast listeners on January 5th, many of which we have heard, all hell is going to break loose tomorrow. It's going to be moving. It's going to be quick. And all I can say is strap in. The latest indictment has not slowed him down. This is from Friday's episode of Bannon's podcast. We're going to get to the bottom of 3 November, and we're going to decertify the electors, okay? Thanks to the right-wing media ecosystem, Bannon and other Trump partisans don't need to convince much of anybody of much of anything. What's the plan here, Charlie? Go ahead.
Steve Bannon is the tip of the spear right now. Look, he's not scared. He's going to brazen this out. He's going to make himself a martyr. He doesn't care about this. He figures he can run the clock out. He's probably thinking he might get another pardon like he did for grifting about the wall. Look, what Steve Bannon is focused on is pushing the big lie as far as it can possibly go. And on that podcast, after he was indicted, he said, we're going to have a constitutional crisis. We are going to decertify the election. He also, early on, talked about the need to use January 6th to kill the Biden presidency in its crib, to completely discredit it. What we are seeing is a strategy of pure chaos, of real nihilism. And it's being embraced by the former president of the United States. So it is important to keep an eye on Steve Bannon, because what Steve Bannon represents is not just one guy out there with evidence. He represents the strategy to pull down the Biden administration and to relitigate this the entire election. And also keep in mind that this indictment does not compel him to testify. It is merely punitive. So don't expect Steve Bannon to be testifying or giving evidence anytime soon.
Juanita, what's the Democrats' defense here with this possible plan from Steve Bannon?
I think the plan for Democrats should be really focusing on getting as much of the executive materials that they can from the archives, really making sure that moves forward, because we know that, as Charlie just mentioned, this does not compel Bannon to testify. So there are other ways that they could potentially get access to information, to notes, to messages and conversation logs. And that might be a way for them to do it. I think the other thing is to continue to apply pressure and continue their threats of criminal contempt charges to other witnesses who may flip and reverse course and stop deferring to Trump and show up and participate and offer up substantive information to the Select Committee. Because, again, these threats of criminal contempt charges have teeth, with the DOJ backing them up in this Bannon case. And that absolutely sends a signal to other folks who may not have the funds to fight an appeal after appeal in the courts in terms of these criminal charges. And so you're going to have a witness reverse course. And I think it's just a matter of time before we see that happen.
Jonathan Allen, Juanita Tolliver, Charlie Sykes, thank